You're listening to Beyond the Sermon, the podcast of First Methodist Church in Collingswood, New Jersey. On our podcast, the goal is not just to share our sermons, but to go beyond the sermon and talk about what we're learning and what God is doing in us and in our community. The conversation you're about to join was inspired by our Fall 2024 series, A Heart Like His, Seeing the Heart of God in the Life of David. In this series, we're asking the question, what does it look like for us to be a people after God's own heart? You can find more information about our church at fumccollingswood.org. Thanks for joining us for this conversation. Well, this morning, Jeremy's letting me do the intro, and we have with us Will Walker, who is our organist, technical director, problem solver, anything else we happen to need him to do. We're going to hear a little bit about his story, his deepest, darkest secrets, favorite memories, and who he's going to vote for this election cycle.
He doesn't even know I texted you that. About the deepest, darkest secret.
It's so true.
I didn't know anything.
I literally texted Jeremy. I said, so could you just give me a heads up on what questions you're going to ask and everything? And his first text was just deepest, darkest secret.
Absolutely. We go all in here on the Beyond the Sermon podcast. But seriously, we would love to get to know you more and let our listening audience know you a little bit better as part of our team here at First Methodist. So tell us a little bit of your story. Growing up, how'd you come to know Jesus? How'd you wind up playing organ here at the church? Who's Will Walker?
Oh, wow. I am trying to figure that out myself. I'll let you know when I do.
Who was Will Walker?
Who was Will Walker? Well, Will Walker grew up right in town here, not Collingswood, but Haddon Township. Literally half of... I saw you wearing a Haddon Township shirt the other day. Whose son plays for the Haddon Township Hawks football?
Because Josiah plays for Haddon Township. He plays football for them. Because Collingswood doesn't have a team.
Right.
At that point, just don't let him play. No, I'm kidding. I have no beef in this fight.
I was about to say, when Theo gets a little older and see what I say about that. I grew up in Haddon Township, literally about a half a block away from Collingswood, if that makes any difference at all.
No.
But my parents actually sent me to preschool at Christian Day Nursery, which is the nursery school at the First Baptist Church in Collingswood. So that's where I went to nursery school. And through there and their church visitor, because back then churches had church visitors.
What is that?
Essentially...
Somebody from the church comes and visits, knocks on the door.
And visits the family and talks to them and invites them out and any questions and things like that. So we were on the rosters at CDN, and the church visitor was visiting all of the families of the kids that went there, which is a great outreach, right? And invited us to Sunday school, or, my sister and I. My sister didn't go there. She's older than I am. She went to a different preschool. And my parents started taking us to Sunday school at First Baptist Church in Collingswood. That turned into my dad taking us to Sunday school because my parents divorced when I was young, and my dad had us on weekends. So he would take us, drop us off at Sunday school, go do his errands real quick, and then come and pick us up. And without going into a lot of details, he ended up being saved as well because the pastor came out, noticed, and invited him to adult Sunday school. So bottom line there is I was actually baptized with my dad in the pool at the same time when I was about 10 years old. So I came to know Christ at a young age, basically through the church inviting us to Sunday school, which is really cool. Spent my whole youth at First Baptist in Collingswood, FBC, doing youth group and camps. And for them, it was Camp Lebanon up in Flemington, New Jersey. For us, it's Delenco Camp. It's every church has a camp, right? And did a lot of music and drama and things like that, helped with VBS. Just my whole youth was spent doing things at the church. Best man at my wedding I met at that church. And it was just it was a good positive experience for me. I think especially, life wasn't hard in a broken home, but it was still a broken home, right? So I think it was a good grounding kind of mechanism for me as well. So that's kind of my youth and how I came to Christ. How I came to this church would be through my beautiful wife. I knew her from kindergarten, really, because we went through the whole school system together. But I wasn't really interested in her, nor she me, until late in high school. So we started dating late high school, college age, and her family had gone to this church. She grew up in this church. So I was invited to help out in different music things and theatrical productions, because this church had huge theatrical productions back in the day in the 90s. And I would bring her over to FBC to do things there, and we just kind of hop back and forth between churches, just doing what we do best and helping out, and it was really good.
You say doing what you do best, which is
special musics or playing and singing, being part of again theatrical productions that were being put on here.
How did you get into music and theater stuff?
How did I get into music and theater? Well, we can go back. Music was my dad. My dad played the piano ever since he was young. So he started teaching me piano when I was like 4 years old. And after about 2 years, he was like, if you're going to keep doing this, you need a real teacher. So they found a real teacher for me. And I was with her all the way, sometime into college was when I stopped actually taking lessons. But I took classical lessons all the way through my young life. And kudos to my parents who, every kid says, I hate this. I don't want to practice. I don't want to do this anymore. And my parents were like, you don't get to decide that. And again, not. I don't want to say that. Look, if you're listening and it just doesn't sound good, and your kid wants to quit like that, that's one thing. But they saw something in me. They heard something in me, and they were like, "No, you have some talent there. If you quit now, you'll regret it." And I've heard that from so many people, right? So kudos to them for not letting me quit and helping me get to the point where I had to make the decision on my own to stop taking lessons. And at that point, I could do what I wanted to do and needed to do with that. Theater was basically just school, getting involved with school productions and realizing how much I really loved it. And that just continued on in community theaters and semi-regional things, throughout the years after that.
So then you're doing that kind of stuff for the church while you're dating Christine or married to? I don't know when that
dating starts. Yep, dating a few different times. Obviously she was really interested and passionate in those areas as well. So, they kind of overlapped and we would do those things together. And it was really a really nice way for us to kind of come together at church, not just outside in school or things like that. So that's how I first, pretty much came to know of and came to, darken the doors of this church, was through that. I'm not going to go through my whole personal life with Christine and how we kind of came to the point where we were going to get married. But we were married, and we were married in this church. Obviously, this is the bride's church, right? However, both of our pastors married us, though. Dick Escher and my pastor, George Hawthorne from First Methodist Church, kind of did it because we were
alternating words.
Not quite. Dick was really the presiding minister, but George participated in a lot of ways because he was really influential in my growing up over at FBC. So we were married in the church. But then once we were married, here, Christine was, that's Pat and Stan's daughter. And at FBC, that was Bill Walker's son, or Bill and Donna's son, my stepmom, Donna. So we're we kind of really want a church to kind of call our own. Mm-hmm. So as we start our life together, so we decided to look for another church. And we did. We found, we looked at different churches and landed at a church which did not end up going well in the long run. We were there for many, many years, but, a lot of stuff was uncovered and it just became a not good place to be. So after we had 2 kids and Asher was about to be born, we found ourselves kind of without a home church anymore. And we were just really looking for guidance on where God wanted us to land. So we started praying, and we felt like God said that, we really needed to be in a local church, because the churches we were at, some churches we were looking at were, 30 minutes away, all the way down 70. I mean, that's a nightmare for youth events during the week and things like that. So we felt like he said, you need to be at a local church for your kids. We wanted our kids to have the same experience we did on easily being able to invite their friends out, because, if you're going 30 minutes down Route 70, that's different than if you're just hopping 5 minutes in Collingswood, right? So we really wanted that experience for them. So we were looking at, frankly, both of our home churches, right? FBC and here at FUMC.
So why are we better?
Strong claim there.
You picked us.
We did.
I'm not claiming that. With your life and your whole family decision.
So what you're trying to say, Jeremy, is why do you think God led you to this church instead of that other church?
Yeah, you can pastize that. Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't here, so I can't take the glory for it.
I'm not even the pastor. I'm not even the pastor, and apparently I pastorized it. Okay. No. Seriously, though. The main reason, I mean, we were familiar with both pastors, right? Christine was attending a Bible study over there, and so we knew the Nannerys at the time. John Nannery was pastor there. I don't know if people here would know him, John and Christine. And then here was Sam Mountain, obviously. I mean, Sam was the one who dedicated Asher because we didn't have a home church, so we had talked to him and felt comfortable with that. So Asher was dedicated right in our parlor here. But the real main reason was we wanted a safe youth group for our kids to grow up in. And First Baptist Church really didn't have a youth group to speak of. It was a smaller congregation. And not only that, but we knew Sean and Nicole prior to this point, and we knew that we trusted them.
Yeah.
So we trusted them with our kids, and that's the reason. I mean, you guys know.
So what I'm hearing through your story is that people and relationships matter. There are people who reached out and invited you guys that got your family involved in church. There were people that you knew and trusted when you guys were in a place where you said, where are we going to put down our roots and get connected to a local church? It was people that mattered more than necessarily what name was on the front of the church or different things. I mean, some of the offerings, like the programs and stuff, played into it, but really it was.
But even in those offerings, it was again the people, and that's really been I feel like a guiding principle, at least in my life, is that I've always said, like, yes, I grew up Baptist. I'm currently at a Methodist church and transferred membership here, but I will not affiliate as a Methodist or a Baptist or a whatever, right? I don't follow a denomination. I don't follow a person per se. However, their beliefs and their leadership play a big part in whether I'm willing to put myself under spiritual authority of those people, right? Because I've been under spiritual authority of people that I knew I had to get out of, right? So we learned those lessons. God taught us those lessons. But I need a church where I can believe what leadership believes. I can get behind it, and it's going to make me want to serve in the capacities that I feel God is leading me to serve. I find that in a church. I don't care what the name is. I don't care what's on the building. I don't care if there is a building. That's where I need to serve.
And that's what leads us to now you looking for a new church, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, and then Scott came along and threw a wrench in it all. And so when did you get hired by the church? When did that
that's interesting, because lots of people who were there back then would have been like, oh, well, you came here because you're the organist here. And that's actually not true. We had made the decision to come to this church. We had made that decision, and part of that was actually talking to Christine's parents, because they had continued to worship here and serve here. And funny story, whether you want to keep this in or not, but we weren't ignorant to the problems that were in the church, because there's problems in every church, right? There's issues and frustrations and things like that. So we weren't ignorant to that because we knew Christine's parents and we were loosely affiliated with the church through them and things like that. So, but it's funny because when we told them that we had decided that this is where we want to go, they spent an entire evening basically laying out all of the issues and problems with the church, almost like, are you sure you want to do this? So we have our own friends here, and we're going to be sitting with them, and we're not always going to be able to spend time with you. We get that. We're likewise. You know what I mean? So it was kind of funny in that respect. But God had led us here. We knew that, and ultimately they were very happy that we were coming here. Don't get me wrong at all. So after we made the decision to come here, very, very shortly after that, in fact, I'm sure probably the decision was already made to go from one blended service to 2 services like we are now. And they were going to have a traditional and a contemporary service. And I got a call from Sean and Sam, hey, you want to have breakfast? We'd like to talk with you. I don't even know if they knew we had decided to come here or not. I'm not sure, but it was that close.
Yeah.
However, I can say before God with my hand on a Bible that, we had made the decision. God had led us here prior to me getting the job here. Yeah. It wasn't the job that brought me here. That was just a bonus. That was God saying, okay, you listen to me now. I have more work for you.
So that was how many years ago?
Probably around 12, because it was probably 2 to 3 years after we left our previous church, which was, I think, it must have been 2009 because it was right when Asher was being born.
Yeah.
So Asher's 15, 2 to 3 years, 12, 13 years ago.
And what are some of the ways you've seen God work in this congregation over that span of time?
When we came into the church, Sam had been here for a handful of years, and from what we had known of the past in the church, there was a lot of division in the church prior to Sam coming. There was just a lot. There's a lot of people who had left for various reasons.
Yeah, and people who were here then know what those issues are, and people who weren't here don't necessarily need to know. So
yeah,
there was division.
So there's division within the church prior to Sam.
Correct.
And that's
so Sam came in, and one of Sam's greatest gifts, and anyone will tell you this who knows Sam, is he knows how to connect with people and help them heal. That's just a gift that he has. And he came into this church and literally helped to heal this church through Christ's love, right? He just loved people, which is what you need when you're hurting, right? So Sam basically gave this church life support and helped it back to life. I don't know where we started with this. What have I seen? What have I seen over the past years?
Have you seen God work?
Right. So I've seen God work through Sam in that way. And I feel like Sam is destined to do that and always was destined to do that. Right. Not that he can't, lead a larger church or something like that. But that's his true gift. It was a joy working with Sam all the years that I was here, and just kind of helping the church grow and thrive. And there's other stories in there we can get into. But I've seen God take a church that was almost dead, breathe life into it, and then through different steps, and part of that step is Scott coming in as well, and just this new life. And God had to prune things too, right? There was even just a few years ago prior to Scott coming, maybe even after Scott coming, I don't know exactly, but our church was still very divided in mindsets. Just in what people really wanted the church to move forward in certain areas, and other people really, really didn't, and there was a lot of division. And honestly, Christine and I saw that, and we were just like, are we really is this where we need to be? Mm-hmm. We really did question that for a little while, and we're wondering whether or not we needed to start looking at other churches, and that was a tough time. And we were honestly wondering what was going to happen when Sam did decide to leave, who we were going to get. right? Was the denomination going to basically try to turn this church into what they wanted it to be rather than what we felt it should be? Just in the nick of time, our DS recommended Scott, and we got to know Scott and Meg, and we were like, okay, God, that's what we were looking for, because I think we had literally said, let's see who comes, and God, use that if you need to as a sign. And then we didn't even question it after that. It was just like, yep, here we are.
I know in the time that I've known you, which is that's been almost 2.5 years already.
Yeah, right.
It seems that there's been a lot of personal spiritual growth in the past couple of years. And so I'm curious, how has God either spoken to you through his word or spirit, or what has he been doing in your life? And you can keep it vague without the individual trials or circumstances that led to that, but how have you noticed yourself drawing closer to God in the past year or two?
I'll go back a little further and tell the story of how I became tech director, because I feel like that was a lesson in God's timing.
Okay, so when you started here, you weren't tech director, just organ.
Just organist.
Okay.
Yep, all the way up through, frankly, COVID, I was just the organist, and I would lead worship, and when that was, I always said to myself, yes, it's my job to play the organ. That's what I get paid for, and I always said that when I lead worship, whenever Sean couldn't be there or whatever, that's kind of my service to the church. I don't get paid for that. I don't get an extra paycheck for that or anything like that. Like someone from the outside would coming in. I just want to do that. So I wasn't. There wasn't a tech director, right? There was someone who led the tech team. Phil led the tech team, which was essentially just someone on the soundboard and then someone making sure that we had recordings archived on CD. That kind of grew from the radio program, which some of the older members of the church may remember the radio program. So COVID hits, and here we are, a leadership team, Sam, Sean, myself, Leon Fraley and Matt Peace, wondering, how do we do this? How do we, everyone was wondering, how do you run a church like this? But, I got laid off shortly after COVID because of COVID. It wasn't just me. It was 600 plus people in my company. Absolutely devastating to me because I'm like, what now? Not only is it loss of your job, but, I'm also 50 years old. Do I start a new career? How do I find something? How do you look for a job in COVID, which is really hard too, because people aren't really hiring. So it was really devastating time. And I was like, why now? Why this? What, you start questioning God. But I did have a 15-week severance because I'd been there 15 years. So we got a week a year, which was really, really nice. Unemployment helps a little bit and things like that. So I had some time. So I was able to, through that, spend time kind of getting the church into how do we do a video? How do we do a live stream? How do we get out to our members when they can't come to church because we can't have a service? Yeah. So a lot of my time was focused on that, because I was still getting a paycheck. And I really feel like that was God's timing. It wasn't more than a month or two after I stopped getting that paycheck that I found a new job and the church was up and running with live stream stuff. So that enabled me to be able to look back and say, oh, you had something really good planned here. And I just had to kind of get through it not knowing and trust you.
The new life after grief and loss.
Exactly.
That we talked about.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but the job I have now is infinitely better and more flexibility than the job I had before. So it truly is a testament to God's goodness. So I learned a lot through that. And also, through COVID and through just everything that happened in that period, not a secret to anyone around here that, my wife, Christine, chose to leave her classroom teaching job through that for a lot of reasons. And both of us found ourselves at that point at a time where we really had to dig deep in and see kind of what God was doing in our lives individually and with some professional help too. So there's been a lot of growth in me, and is not stopping. It's continuing on even now. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned before I came from a broken home. That's not anything I delved into prior to just a couple years ago, and started really digging and delving into that and how that made me feel, or how that made me learn how to not feel, and kind of lock it away. And just there's been so much that God's been doing in unpacking this. And sometimes that's messy, and sometimes it's hard and we don't want to do it, but ultimately it's worth it.
Now, lastly, I'd ask, what are you most excited for with the church in the future?
I think I'm most excited now because I had mentioned before that I've been here through what I feel is division in the church, even more recently than the back before Sam phase. But I'm excited because I see for the first time in this past handful of years a church that really is unified. And we've seen it through the votes that we've had, through the different denominational votes, things like that. But I really see a church that's unified in their vision. It's unified in how they feel about where God wants us. And that is what excites me the most because, like I said, even at the beginning, we'll wrap it up, right? Like, I'm not here for a building. I'm not here for a certain person. I'm here because I feel that's where God has me right now. And it's even more exciting to see that everyone is unified in the fact that we want to be here for the same purpose, right? Not just the same purpose, because that makes people who might have gone somewhere else seem less. And that's not it at all, right? It's just we want to play out the purpose God has for us in a similar way, right? And I think that's really important. And I see that here. So that makes me think, do I want to keep the building? Yeah. But if we don't, it just really doesn't matter in the long run. Yeah, it's going to be harder. Yeah, we're going to have to figure things out. Yeah, we might have to lug equipment like I did when we were at that church that met at a high school.
Yay for portable churches.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. And we've hauled it all back to the storage unit afterwards. I've been there. And I was a lot younger when I was there. It was easier when I was younger. So I'm not looking forward to that. But you know what? The building doesn't matter, right? It's God's purpose. It's the unified body that God has here that can do great things for him.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, as you mentioned, that God has provided multiple people on staff that are used to that, of, like you said, portable church and that. So when my home church burned down and we were jumping from building to building to building, from schools to the Broadway Theater before it was back to being the Broadway Theater, to random warehouses.
I didn't know you were part of that church. Yeah. I remember when the church was in there. Yeah. Interesting. Very cool.
I was the first. This is my tout to fame, is I was the first person to tell the pastor that the church was on fire.
And not because he started the fire.
Interesting that we both have history of that, and I think, like you said about unified.
Even me.
No, and it's not about you, Scott. Sorry.
and even us, Meg and I were part of a portable church plant when I was in seminary. For the last 2 years that we were in seminary, we were part of a church that set up and tore down and did all that kind of stuff, and I was the tech director.
Gosh.
Great. So you can take that on when we have to do it again.
And that just means you'll be the lead pastor. Well,
right.
That's a trade-off.
Okay.
Sure, I'll take that.
Touche.
And so that, and then also when you talk about unified around a purpose, I think some people will listen and think, well, shouldn't the Big C church be unified around the similar purpose of the Great Commission and that? So, but I think with all the discussions and meetings we've had, that we're very unified in our calling as a congregation in this community.
Yes.
And how we're going to specifically act out the Great Commission here in our community and the other things that God calls us to do as the church. And that's what's, really, really exciting for me as well. Oh, we do? I forgot we do that. Do you have any questions for us about anything?
Well, you didn't tell me I could come up with
I know, I
questions
completely forgot we do that. But we'll just make that available so that you're not the only one on the hot seat.
I have to say, Jeremy, you surprised me the other day. I knew that you were a musician. I knew you played guitar, and I know you sit back at the drums. I won't say you play drums. I'll say you play drums. You won't say you play drums.
Thank you.
But so I know you do that. But the other day you were like, "Oh, Legally Blonde. That was the first show I played, professionally or whatever." And I'm like, "Wait, like you're that good?" Like
at one point, yeah.
See, I never knew that about you.
Yeah.
What else in that realm don't I know about you? Like what was that part of your life? Like
someone from church was a high school musical director, and they knew I played guitar even though I didn't play it at church, and they're like, "Can you like keep up with music?" I was like, "If you give me chords, I can't read music, but like if you give me chords, like I can do that, and then and I can read tablature if that's needed." And they brought me in, and it was actually funny because I didn't believe that I could be on a professional-ish level. Once you get paid, it's technically professional.
Right,
I guess.
exactly.
And so I brought a friend that was a really good guitarist, and I was going to play bass. And then we get in there, and he could not keep up with the band. So I had to show him how to, like, simplify his guitar, basically like think power chords without a couple extra fingers, and play the bass. And then I ended up on guitar for that piece. And so had a wonderful time. Was very, very blessed. And that's why I said in my last word, I was like, I have more theater history than you might know, Will, that I didn't want to,
right?
Because you guys are so great at everything. And I've gotten to go to a show with Christine and Will at Messiah College, and to hear the post rundown that they do after a show is incredible, is absolutely incredible. But it's things that I would never in a million years notice. And they're like, well, in the 5 other versions of this play or musical I've seen, I liked A, B, C, and D. And I was like, I didn't know that the cow wasn't supposed to moo. They knew these little intricate details.
Wasn't even
of the
supposed to be a
characters.
person.
Yeah,
the cow was a prop.
Yeah, and but I don't have an extensive history, but little things here and there. I dabbled.
Well, like jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, I guess I'm a little more of a master when it comes to music, but like I've always said that about myself in other skill areas, never focused on a specific career, type of thing. I'm like doing all kinds of different things.
Yeah, no, I have realized that I've lived, it almost feels like multiple lifetimes in the very short time I've been. And so even people that have known me for years and years in certain contexts will hear a story and they're like, when the heck was that? Right. I'm like, oh yeah, well, there was this whole
see, that's exactly how I see you.
Oh yeah, it's endless stories. And I always tell my youth that like there's when you graduate and go to young adults, then you like unlock certain stories that cannot be shared but can be openly shared at young adults. And so there's multiple.
You've leveled up.
Yes, you've leveled up. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I feel like I know Scott a little bit better because Scott and I have taken the time to kind of like get together on our own. So like we've been able to share a little more of our lives together than I have with you, which is why I kind of like had a question for you. So I don't think I don't have anything that jumps out at me.
That's okay.
Contrary to popular belief, I am an open book.
Why is that contrary to?
You've never heard people say like, "Oh, I never know what Scott's thinking," or like when we said so, he's always so like stoic in his face. I never know like what he's thinking or anything like that.
Let's kind of be a little more accurate in that, and tell me if I'm wrong here. You are not necessarily an open book, but you're a book lying on the table that anyone is able to open.
I'd agree with that. And I think it's more in the context of committees that you do the more stoic thing.
That might be true.
How can the listeners be praying for you in this season?
Right now, we're in a very busy time in our lives with our kids. And I say kids with quotes because 2 of my kids are practically grown-ups. But we're in just a very, very busy time where I feel like we're just always on the go. We have one at home and one in Florida and one currently in Nashville, going back to Pennsylvania. And even just from now to the end of the year, it's all really good stuff, but the logistics sometimes can be really hard. And the emotions of being reminded how far away your kids are is hard too. But knowing that they're exactly where God wants them to be and needs them to be is so comforting. So just prayer around balancing all of the family things and then my regular work job that actually gives me the big paycheck, and then the service to the church and like all of the different things that I'm trying to balance, and continuing my own spiritual and emotional growth with God through that. Sometimes that ends up being like, oh, that's right, I have to do that too, and it's just like, wow, that was not good. That should be one of the first priorities in my life, so it's a juggle for sure. So I think that's one of the things that I would pray for. I would ask people to pray for.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on.
Glad to be here. It's about time, right?
Well, that's our conversation for today. But that doesn't mean the conversation is over. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these topics as well. To ask a question about anything we've discussed in this episode or to join the conversation, you can head over to fumccollingswood.org/podcast. Thanks for being part of this conversation.